Hey everybody, this is Victor Rivas Rivers, and I wish I could be there tonight with you to watch The Mask of Zorro and meet some of you. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the film in a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you first about why Kindred Place means so much to me. You see, I grew up in a home where domestic violence and child abuse took place on a level of torture. And this was at a time when there were no hotlines for my mother to call, no shelters for her to run to and take us with her. And there were certainly no places like Kindred Place that could have possibly helped counsel my father and helped him with what I believe is not only his abusive behavior, but what I believe he had a serious mental illness. But this was the first 15 years of my life. And so as a child, I was beaten, I was tied up, I was locked in closets, I was hammered, I was burned, to name a few of the things he did. I also watched the unspeakable abuse that he did to my mother, not just physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. And of course, my siblings um, were also victims of my father's abuse. There were six of us, five of us survived. I have a brother who did not survive. Um, and so I honor him in October as not only as a time for us to raise awareness about domestic violence, but also a time for us to remember those that we've lost to this issue, which is actually the most underreported crime in America. But this behavior continued throughout my childhood. And at 12 years old, I walked into my city's police department and I took off all my clothes so they could see the bruises, welts, and burns that covered my body, because he did a great job of not hitting us where you could see it. And the officers were horrified at what they saw. And then I begged them, I said, please go to my house and arrest them and get them out of there for good. And what the police said they could do was to have me sign a formal complaint, and they would put me in a police car and drive me back to our house where they would talk to my father. And I said, no, you don't seem to understand. If I do that and you don't arrest him when you leave, he's going to kill me. Well, they said there was nothing more that they could do, that in fact it was a private family matter. And that's the title of my memoir. So we really had nowhere to turn to at the time. So things continued to escalate in our home. And eventually my father kidnapped my two brothers, my sister and me, from Los Angeles, California, and he took us all the way to Miami, Florida. And we had no idea where my mother was. And it turned out my mother, not only did she have no idea, but she was also pregnant with my sister Carmen. And it took her a couple of days to get back to the house because my father had driven her outside of town and left her there pregnant. And when she returned, everything and everyone had vanished without a trace. Now, it took my mom many months to figure out where we were in Miami, have my sister, baby sister Carmen, and then to move there herself. But even though she got a divorce, my father earned more money at the time than she did. So he retained custody of all the children living with him. So without my mother in the household, things went from worse to horrendous. And that eventually led to the first and only physical confrontation with my father that I started in defense of one of my younger siblings he was about to abuse. I stood up to him finally at 15 and a half years old. And I won the fight. And I realized in that moment that here was a man that had terrorized our entire family for the first 15 and a half years of my life, and was now cowering and crying beneath me. But all I ever wanted from my father was for him to love me. But in that instant, I knew the truth that I think many victims of domestic violence and family violence, child abuse, finally realized it, and that's that love should never hurt. No matter how bitterly a man cries as he beats a woman and says, I'm only doing it because I love you so much, that he's brutally punishing his children to make them better because he loves them so much. That's not love. And this is not love either. So that very night, right after that fight, I ran away from home, and I was living on the streets until a high school classmate of mine spotted me and told me that everyone was looking for me. The school, the cops, and of course my father. And I told him what had been going on with me at home, and he insisted that I go home and tell my story to his father. Now, in my story, I've had many angels and advocates that have stepped in to guide me out of my darkness and to help me heal my wounds and move forward. And my friend's father was one of those angels. He also happened to be a lawyer. So through his help, I was able to take my father to court, where I was granted a restraining order. Now, you have to understand that this was 1971, and it was practically unheard of for a child to take a parent to court. But I'll never forget walking into that judge's chambers and seeing that the judge was a woman with pictures of her children on her desk, and I knew I was going to be safe. And that was one of the last times that I saw my father, who took his own life when I was in my 20s. Now, we often hear the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And, some of you may think, well, maybe it's overused or it's a little quaint, but, I'm here to tell you that I am that child who was raised and rescued by his village. And my village had a lot of diversity in it because I was taken in by a Jewish family that owned a Chinese restaurant, an Italian family with 9 kids. I made 10. There were 2 Cuban families, a Southern Baptist family. And for all the years I've been given the message that I was deserving of being heard, I was now being given a different message by people who cared, my coaches, my teachers, and those families that took me in, and that I was a good human being, worthy of being loved and of loving in return. And so through this process, I was able to go from being a violent member of a street gang in my sophomore year of high school to president of my senior class. I lettered in 4 sports. I was captain of the football team. I went on to receive a 4-year football scholarship at Florida State University, where I played for the Seminoles. I graduated from Florida State with a degree in criminology. Who knows why I'm an actor, but and shortly after I graduated from college, I was also a free agent draft pick and the first Cuban American to be given a tryout with the Miami Dolphins. I was out with them for 2 preseasons. It didn't put me on the active team roster, but it allowed me to play on the team that I idolized growing up as a kid in Miami. So, my journey has taken many paths, and I'm very proud of many of my roles as an actor, as an author, as an activist. But my most important role for the last 26 years of my life have been as a father to my son Eli, who joined the movement of trying to end violence against women and children at 5.5 years old, and he graduated from Harvard University in 2016, and now he's following a path to go to law school and to try to make a difference out there in his own way. So I'm very proud of the work you're doing. I hope that I represent the end result of your investment, because sometimes maybe you don't see it, but maybe I'm one of those little kids, one of those boys that you're working with, or a family that you're working with. Know that you're making a difference out there. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Mask of Zorro now. So the interesting thing was the original director of the Mask of Zorro was Robert Rodriguez, who was the Latino director. And I was actually up for one of the lead roles at that time. And Sony Pictures and him didn't see eye to eye, so he left the project, and they brought in Martin Campbell, who was a British director, who is well known for doing GoldenEye, one of the James Bond films. And he was able to secure Anthony Hopkins to play the original Zorro. And so in the film, I play a character who's actually based on California history, and my character's name is Joaquin Murrieta. And Joaquin Murrieta was the first, basically the image for Carson Callers, who wrote Zorro, the book of Zorro. Joaquin Murrieta was known as sort of the Mexican Robin Hood, because at the time when the gold was being discovered in California, a lot of the gold was being discovered by Mexicans, and the Anglos were stealing the gold back. We're stealing the gold from them, and so Joaquin and his posse of men were going out at night with ash from the coals of the fire, the campfires, and putting it over their eyes. So that's where the mask concept, came in. And so they were robbing the gold back and giving it back to the Mexican population. And so he had legendary status. And the only way they could prove that they killed Joaquin Murrieta is that they cut his head off and stuffed it in a jar, and so they could show it at state fairs and says, come see the head of Joaquin Murrieta on posters. So I am that character in the film, and you might see my head later in the film too. And but what's really, really funny is that Antonio Banderas, who I'm going to play his brother, I was one of the last actors that was cast, and to play the role of his brother, and he was very interested in that. So he was married to Melanie Griffith at the time, the actress Melanie Griffith. Well, you have to know that the last family that adopted me in high school is a Cuban family, and their son became an actor. His name is Stephen Bauer. So if you've seen the movie Scarface, He was Manny in Scarface. He was Pacino's sidekick. If you saw Ray Donovan, he played Avi on Ray Donovan for five or six seasons. So that's Stephen Bauer. So he's like my brother. He was married to Melanie Griffith, and they have a child together too. So so when the director revealed to Antonio, who was playing his brother, Melanie was there in the room, and he said, you know, is an actor named Victor Rivers, and Melanie started screaming, Victoire, Victoire, because that was my nickname. She called me Victoire, and Antonio got really jealous, and he says, you know, who's this guy Victoire? So anyway, so it was, you know, kind of interesting that here I was playing her new husband's brother in a film. And so we filmed in Baja California in the Sonora Desert. And so we were staying at a resort on one side of the highway, and then we traveled 3 miles into the desert, and we arrive at the set for the very first day, and there are lined up our 5 ambulances. And we get out of our crew van, and we also see 15 day laborers with machetes in their hands, like this. And Antonio and I walk up because we speak Spanish, and we say, you know, what's going on? What's with the machetes? And one of them says, we've killed 15 already today. And we go 15 what? Snakes. So it turns out that Sonora Desert has the biggest concentration of poisonous snakes in the entire world. So, and we were going to be rolling around on the ground all day. So these guys were standing by, you know, killing snakes. And we had ambulances, because if you got bit, they were going to throw you in an ambulance and you know, get you straight to the hospital. So we really had, it was really fun to shoot this film. We play orphans in the movie, and so I hope you enjoy this film. I think Anthony Hopkins brought a lot to the film, because it could have been very campy, but you know, the fact that he's such an incredible actor. So again, I want to just thank you for being there. I wish I could be there with you. And again, I just from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank everyone at Kindred Place. And also I want a big shout out to City Current for the things that they sponsor in your community. And so enjoy, peace out, and we'll see you soon, I hope. All right, be safe out there. Bye-bye.